Transformers Rise of the Beast is epic, bro. This is one of many blockbusters to come out in 2023, and it seems like it was kind of forgotten in the huge storm of them that came out, like The Flash, Across the Spider-Verse, and like many others. But despite there being a lot of shit out there right now, I decided that I would go watch it anyway, because I was in Texas when I saw it, and I wanted to watch it in one of those really cool theaters that they got there. And that shit was so cool, bro. It looked like a fucking hotel room when I was inside there. Anyway, yeah, this movie was not really on my radar, but that's because I'm not exactly the biggest Transformers fan. I've only recently started reading some of the comics, and before, I've only seen like 2 movies, being the original and Bumblebee. And I gotta admit, I actually really do love Bumblebee. I think that's really fun. I like all the characters, and also Bumblebee is really great. And the opening scene is also really cool, and it's really funny to me how a lot of Transformers fans that I've talked to said that they didn't see Bumblebee in theaters, but I did. So I can say that I was able to experience this scene in theaters, and that's just really funny. Especially since when I was a young jit and I saw Bumblebee in theaters, I had not seen the original Transformers before that, so I had no idea what the significance of this was. And even though I didn't really care for this new movie, I was a little more interested in it once I found out that it was a sequel to Bumblebee. And it was also the starting of, like, a brand new universe, so that means I didn't really have to watch all the other films to know what was going on. Which is great, because I've always found Transformers to be a bit intimidating to get into. I can't ever really explain why, but I thought it was I was kind of nervous to start reading the comics and start watching a lot of the movies. Again, I don't know why, but I figured this movie was a decent place to start. And yeah, I mean, it was the start. I think really the only 2 characters that this movie shines a decent light on are Optimus Prime and Primal. We get enough with Primal to make him interesting, and Optimus Prime actually gets a full character arc in this movie. And in turn, they are both my 2 favorite characters in the movie, and they also get some really cool things to do, like in the action sequences. I also thought that Mirage was pretty good, and I gotta say, I'm really happy that he doesn't sound like Pete Davidson. I was kind of worried about that, but I'm glad that he doesn't. However, if you ask me, these 3 characters are good, however, the rest are just kind of whatever. Characters like RC and Wheeljack aren't very good in this movie. They aren't bad, they just don't get a lot that makes them stand out. But the most lackluster character has gotta be Scourge. Scourge was a surprisingly underdeveloped character in this movie, which is really weird because he's the main antagonist. Or he's at least the one who gets the most screen time, and they don't do anything with him, like we don't know anything about this dude. Apparently that he had a whole backstory that was deleted from the movie, and I don't know why they deleted it. They must have cut it for time, but I seriously think that the movie suffered from that. Scourge in this movie is essentially a glorified henchman, which I think is pretty lame. Besides a cool design and some cool action moments, he doesn't get a whole lot. And the other 2 villains, whose names I don't even fucking remember, are somehow even lamer. They don't even really have outstanding voices or designs or anything, or even a lot of awesome action moments, and it makes them even less memorable than Scourge. However, I will give this movie credit that it does have a good human character, being, what was his name, Sam? I don't think that Sam is as good as Charlie from Bumblebee, but I thought that he was good enough. We find out enough to make him a little interesting, and he also gets a decent character arc, so I think that he serves his purpose just fine. And it's really cool how he's actually able to join in on the action in the end. That sounds weird out of context. But while we're on that, I might as well mention that the action in this movie was pretty epic. I really enjoyed the car chase at the start with Mirage and the fight outside the art museum. And my favorite was probably the one in Brazil, I think. That one just had the moments that stand out the most to me. And while the final battle has some cool moments in isolation, I think it kind of suffers from just a big battle taking place in a field of nothingness. It's not a very interesting location, and I don't know why movies have been doing this a lot this year. It feels like it's something to avoid a Man of Steel criticism or whatever, and in turn it makes the final action scene look really gray and not visually interesting. Now again, this doesn't mean that the final battle doesn't have cooler standout moments, because it really does. It has quite a few, and a lot of gnarly stuff too. But I just wish that it was set in a more interesting location instead of, like, a volcano. I mean, at least have the volcano, like, fucking erupting the entire time. Come on, man. Like, if you're gonna have a big CGI battle at the end, then fucking embrace it. Also, I wasn't a big fan on how Bumblebee was used in this movie. He dies in, like, the first act, and then he gets brought back in the third act. I'm just sick of this motherfucker dying. We already saw him die in the Bumblebee movie. Why the fuck did he have to die here? I think another disappointment was with the Maximals. They're just kind of there. Like, this movie is called Rise of the Beasts, and most of them don't even show up till, like, over halfway through the movie. Don't get me wrong, some of them are pretty cool, and some of them have, like, no lines at all. And it's weird because the movie starts off with a pretty exciting action scene with them, and then they don't really show up. And it's a shame because some of them are pretty cool, and I really wish the Maximals in general had more screen time, and it would have been cool if there were more of them as well. This kind of just felt like a Transformers movie that happened to feature the Maximals instead of it being really about them. Because, truth be told, it isn't about them. It isn't really about any Transformer, really. I think the one that gets most screen time is probably Mirage, but there isn't a Transformer that you can really say is in the center. Which is at least a different choice for this franchise from the movies that I've seen. Unicron was cool, though. I mean, he doesn't have much in terms of character, but I thought that they did a good job at building him up as a threat. But I think that he isn't, again, he's not really a developed character, and that's just because this movie tries to tackle a lot, and it doesn't have a lot of screen time. I think that this movie really needed to be longer in order to develop all these things properly. Like, again, you got Unicron, you got the Maximals, you got the Autobots, you got a lot here. No, I don't necessarily think that they should have built this shit up for multiple movies, as I don't think that's a requirement when you have a big threat like Unicron. That's just something that's been a little more normalized recently with franchises like the MCU. But I don't think that's a requirement, and I can actually commend a franchise when they have the big threat happen early. I just wish that the movie took more time to develop everything a little more, establish a little more motivation for all the characters, go into them a little more, and I really think it could have done wonders. Because, again, I don't even think that what we got with the characters in the end was necessarily bad. As there are some standouts, like, again, Mirage, Primal, Optimus, they're all pretty good. But we don't know about some others. Like, we don't really know much about Air Razor or Rhinox or anything. And I think that's just the biggest problem with this movie, as it really needed more time, and apparently the original cut was going to be like 3 or 4 hours, which is fucking insane. But it definitely shows how much the movie tries to tackle. Like, apparently there's going to be more with Unicron, Scourge, an entire backstory. It sounded great. Go watch the video by my friend Saj Productions if you want to know more about that shit. I'll leave a link in the description below. That man basically ejaculates to Transformers every day. But I do think that this movie does a good job at setting some soil for a really nice Transformers universe. Even though not every character is necessarily well developed, I think that they have enough in this movie to get you at least interested in this big world. And I am excited to see where this goes in the future. Even if that credit scene was kind of dumb, but that's not the point. And it actually got me interested enough to start reading some of the comics, which I always commend a movie for. I think it's pretty unfortunate that this movie isn't doing very well. But at the same time, I think that's probably because the film doesn't do a whole lot to stand out, especially in comparison to other Transformers movies. Like with the other Transformers movies that I've seen, they at least have something that they excel in, but this movie doesn't have that. Like, this movie has pretty good characters with Noah, but Bumblebee has excellent characters with Charlie. And while this movie has pretty good action, I think that the Bay movies, like the Transformers 1 and Dark of the Moon, which I'm watching as making this video, have excellent and awesome action. It just doesn't necessarily excel in any areas, which I think is pretty unfortunate. However, it does give a promising start for new Transformers fans and a nice way to introduce this new universe. And I know that I listed quite a number of complaints, but none of those were necessarily major things. Biggest thing were some underdeveloped characters, but I don't know, it didn't really hinder my enjoyment a whole lot because it's not like this movie is necessarily trying to be some great character study for anyone. So I think I'll give Transformers Rise of the Beast a 7 out of 10.